Hello, welcome to another MarketMuse content strategy webinar. I'm your host and co-founder of MarketMuse, Jeff Coyle. Today's discussion is titled How to Go from Keywords to Content. And it's going to be a discussion focused on the real enterprise to SMB keyword research world, and really the tactics to use data to your advantage and actually manifest in predictive success. Accomplishing that with amazing content that fills the buy cycle, basically, as we walk through that purchase journey viewpoint with our keyword research efforts. Before I get into our special guest today, a few housekeeping notes. If you have any questions, you get to ask them to us right here. Go to meeting, go to webinar, write Rail in most of your browsers, type them in. I will get them either in line, we'll answer them in the Q&A, or after this, we're doing a 1-hour AMA in the Content Strategy Collective. There will be a bit.ly link on the next slide that I show to get you access to that Slack community, and we'll be going for another hour of more AMA. So if you have any specific questions about specific sites, you really actually want a live audit, or something like that, fire them into the AMA and we'll get to it. The recording will be sent to you in the next couple days. While you're at it, go check out over 50 other content strategy webinars that we do. We have sales enablement leaders like Pam Didner, Andy Crestodina talking about SEO and analytics, all around amazing people like Kevin Indig. Download a couple of those, shoot me a note, tell me the ones you're listening to, and we'll set up a content strategy session. All right, there's the housekeeping. Now I'm gonna intro today's guest. He's an agency founder. He's an agency acquirer. He's the author of the most important book written of our time and year, 2020, a memoir from the future, Nick Eubanks. Thanks for joining us. Tell us a little bit about life story from the future, current mission, original mission, whatever you want to get into in a few minutes.
I'll spare all the boring stuff nobody cares about. Current mission is the same that it's always been, in that just to bring advanced digital strategies, trying to find the new stuff, find cool ways to acquire new users in one way or another, and bring that to the internet.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Two things I will say about you, from just my lens about the dirt, right, is that one of my favorite parts about From the Future is just the transparency. One thing about, you, I think you and maybe PR 2020 are the two people who have really gone above and beyond to describe internal processes, and one of them being pricing, which I thought, in your post, it really shows. When the first time I remember reading that, I was thinking, well, these folks know how to win, because they're really walking through what it takes. It takes the team that it takes, the skills that it takes. And I think that goes a really long way in building trust. So, props on that side. We didn't even prep that part. I just felt I'd dive in because you didn't even get into the details.
Yeah.
Really, tell us a little bit about that, and as far as your mission of that level of transparency and also sharing a lot of your processes.
I mean, a lot of the process stuff originally, the foundation stuff for all that came from Brian Stewart. That's just a testament to the way his brain works and the caliber of work that he does. So within the 2 years now since I got to partner up with Ryan for a sprint, essentially, we've built on top of a bunch of that original process stuff, created some cool new reporting. I mean, just tried to keep up with the times in that sense. It's still all and always has come back to that idea though of the talent. Yeah. An agency is only ever I mean, companies hire agencies because of the talent those agencies have, right? And so have to always try to get the best.
Nice. Well, that's great, and I think that in some of the work that you're doing with Agency Builder, that comes through too. Building out models and reporting for that. So, all right, cool. Well, let's get into it. We are going to talk about keyword research and really get into the details of the things that you see either changing over the last few years, or what you're doing now, or what you see happening in the future. We had an awesome Twitter chat yesterday, to really start throwing stones. You call it stone throwing SEO. I call it dice rolling SEO, but really the goal of keyword research is focused on, actually making predictive, repeatable, successful processes. And, I think one thing that you noted in the Twitter chat, and then also that we were discussing, is, how do you right now, how do you think about search volume? How do you use that as part of your processes? And do you still kind of find teams coming to you, prospects, not yet customers, that are using that as a predictor of clicks and of traffic at the word level, at the broad match keyword level? What types of things are you still seeing where from the standpoint of misuse of search volume or use of search volume?
That's probably the number one thing I think is when we'll have prospects or conversations with other SEO practitioners, other SEO professionals, and they're still basing a lot of their prioritization on volume. I mean, I think search volume is a great consideration. I think it's an important barometer, especially based on what those volume numbers could look like. If it's those eyeballs still have value, it's just where do you prioritize eyeballs versus clicks? So yeah, that massive shift to consider volume but not use it as the main consideration, with probably like competition being the second, but using it as the main consideration and using clicks instead.
So as when you're thinking about clicks, kind of what goes into that, with the the quick rise and fall of clickstream data, what other types of processes are you putting in place to evaluate click potential, not just at the page level or word level, but also at the term pool or the topic model pool? Like exactly. What it goes into that whole thing for you to be able to start to predict more critically or more accurately,
It's just deeper segmentation of the the data we've been collecting and I've been blathering about for a long time, which is identifying all of those intent modifiers, being able to put those into buckets and align those buckets of intent to the topics. Again, I mean, hitting at the core of the whole idea behind the webinar, right? Like beginning to report on groups of those buckets of keywords that show intent at a page level, and looking at the metrics that those are creating. What is their average CTR? What's their click volume and their conversion rate on page versus the other potential, even like same class of keywords or same header or parent term that's also getting traffic to the same page. So I think it's just going deeper. We have so much more data now than we've ever had before, thanks to a lot of the amazing service providers out there or products, I should say. And so being able to segment that in new ways is leading to a lot of really deep intelligence, I think, from planning and customer insight perspective.
So one thing I'll unpack two of those points that you made. One was you kind of mentioned the topic modifier, the keyword modifier concept, and that's before there was solutions available that did topic modeling, high quality topic modeling. That's all we really had. That's all we had was the ability to look at word lists and look for prefixes, suffixes, modifiers in order to signal and define that buyer journey. How are you combining, or first of all, for the audience that maybe doesn't know much about that process, how would you describe the idea of finding a topic and then looking for those modifiers and what you do with them? And then we can get into the second question, which would be, with the advent of new technologies where topic modeling is possible, those might not be keyword modifiers, right? That are in that topic model. Yep. How has that advanced the type of work that you're doing? But yeah, the first things first, in case nobody does the first part, that's going to be a big day for them. So,
man, I'm trying to pull the question out of that. That was a whole bunch.
That's how it is talking to me. No, so the question is basically, if you're not familiar with looking at modifiers, what are the things that you do with those prefixes and suffixes to construct the buyer journey?
Oh yeah, so I mean it's just to infer intent, right? So it's when and then look at the search, like look at your crawl data, or if you're scraping the SERPs, God forbid, or go Google manually if that makes you feel better, and compare some of the interesting things are looking at even just the differences between the SERP modifiers, like the modified versions of the same query classes, for example, right? And then are the SERPs themselves actually different when a modifier is used in the beginning of the term versus after the term, or versus 2 or 3 extra terms further at, like the placement of those modifiers within the overall queries is kind of fascinating to watch in super volatile SERPs, right? Where the SERPs could have a lot of overlap one day and then almost no overlap or no overlap at all in the next. And watching the topic splicing that machines are able to pay attention to and score and aggregate and give direction on, obviously faster than humans, but having to pay attention to like micro topics as those seeds start to grow, to potentially at least ideally have a first crack at getting locked in as the sticky #1 result.
Oh no, I'll get into some of those other strategies for sure that I know we've spoken about, but I think some of the things that you're talking about is part of going from keywords to content is analyzing search results.
Oh yeah, you can't not.
You can't not, right? And it's the things you mentioned are SERP similarity, right, between two queries. It's the flux, how frequently does it change? It's the features. So when you combine similarity analysis, flux analysis, and feature analysis, you're starting to be on the right path. But even then, how do you talk to somebody who still thinks that they're just looking at the SERP analysis, the search results analysis of one word they're trying to rank for? How do you get them thinking critically about an entire, keyword list or an entire, like as you mentioned, a total addressable market? How do you get them over the hump of just thinking, I'm going to look and see who's ranking #1 and do what they do?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's beginning to paint the picture of showing the size of those keyword footprints. For whether it's an entire domain that's a direct competitor, or more likely than not, as we start to break out into the biggest part of the keyword universe, a subcategory or a microcosm of a larger enterprise that has that business unit that is, where that subdivision of an industry or of a niche is now emerging because of this massive spike in online demand. So we're seeing these industries that were slowly coming into the digital age, right? Like we went from, would they say 2020 was the longest year ever, because we went from 2020 to 2030, at least digitally, like the forced amount of innovation, digital innovation and online commerce, like so we're seeing all of these small industries, right, like explode very, very quickly. The easiest one for anybody to connect with is the home gym industry. And it's funny when you look at where I realize I'm going off the rails, but it's funny when you look at where in the supply chain things are breaking down, because it's not just at the manufacturer. A lot of it's actually even gotten back to like the source point, where like there's issues mining raw material for certain types of metals that the manufacturers can't source. Now it's all wild. The times we're living in. Right?
No, I don't think that's off the rails at all, because there's people that sprung up, high volume websites for the particular things that were in dumbbell weights, and they were sourcing them.
So yeah, I mean, if you are a manufacturer or distributor of kettlebells right now, you are probably trying to figure out where to park your new Ferrari.
Yes, exactly right. No, but just taking a little bit of a step back, you've historically focused on those modifiers, right? But then you also posted some things recently, or not so recently, that said really a modern SEO, requires a broader focus on concepts that are needed to be represented by topics, and it's more about addressing all the content needed to create the sometimes legitimate exhibition of expertise, sometimes the illusion of expertise, depending on who's doing it. And it's not about just doing what the top ranking pages do. It's about building the thing that would exhibit intelligence, that would exhibit you have expertise. So when you're thinking about content, you're not thinking necessarily about pages. You're thinking about the whole, you said the whole house, but that whole thing.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. So like depth, I hate to boil it down to a gross oversimplification of like the word count, but I mean, in some instances, like again, just barometer, right? Like leading indicator, even oh so small, like just a barometer. Like if you're looking at the magnitude of the footprint of some sites and how much topicality they've been able to establish, like maybe you don't have to go that wide. Maybe you can go deeper, like much deeper with half the depth or half the width of a topic. But you need to know that, right? Like that's figuring out the table stakes. It's like how deep and wide are these topics in the competitive landscape, and like what are the table stakes for me to even hope to compete? Like how what are all of those topics, and how deep does that coverage need to be?
Absolutely. And you know, I like to reference, we call it the topic universe, right? Basically, and I know you said it's like the total addressable market calculation, where you're looking at all of the topics that you might want to be about, or that you might be competing about, and building out all the different types of content that cover that entire model. And that's a really different process than just saying, oh, the top 3 pages that do well for this topic are a definition, thus I should write a definition. Because the reality is, I might not deserve for my definition a rank, right? I mean, is that how you think about it? Yeah. And so how do you get in? How do you get into that and you know, show that they need to build so much content when it might just look like you're trying to get a very large retainer, you know?
It's true. I mean, I wrote a really ranty piece on why you don't deserve a first page ranking back in, I don't know, like 2013 or 2014. And it was the same like idea that unless, like, in many, it's not always the case, right? There's plenty of edge cases, but in many cases, in the largest industries, sorry, excuse me. Sorry about that. In the largest,
nice brand product placement.
Nice product placement. In the largest and most competitive industries, the data, like, I lost my main train of thought there. Cough got me.
Deserve to ranking 1.
Oh yeah, the reason you would deserve to rank number 1. In the largest and most competitive industries, you need to be willing to invest in actually building the best page on the internet. You know, if you're going to hope to rank in the top 5 positions, let alone on page 1. And I mean, it's more true than ever today in many cases. So it's nice being able to pull like things like a keyword footprint from, obviously, like, you know, from scraping the SERPs, and being able to break those down into looking at who the competitors are that own each part of your funnel. Based on trying to infer as much intent as you can from looking at the topics and the stage of awareness that you would score that topic into, right, as part of the customer journey. But yeah, I love the idea of talking about the total addressable market, because what we're starting to see, you know, as the internet gets bigger and, you know, becomes a bigger, deeper black hole every day, are that some companies are almost able to outgrow, like they saturate their total addressable market. And it doesn't mean that they have 100% of it. It just means that, you know, maybe the most they're going to be able to get from, without, you know, massive additional investment, or without some foundational components of that industry changing, or legislation, or who knows what, the biggest they'll be able to get is, I mean, 35%. I mean, right? Like, can you imagine? I mean, like, that's like, you know, Hershey's or Coca-Cola. Like, that's being the brand. So like, the thing is, these companies, though, and they maximize and they completely saturate that total addressable market, then it's like, well, okay, like, what do we do now? Like, so, you know, because growth at all costs, right? That's how capitalism exists.
Yeah. You know, so, it's a great point. And so, I mean, this was actually something that I was going to ask you a little bit later in the discussion.
We can wait. We can.
Yeah, but no, but winding it back. No, because I'm going to wind it back to this topic as something else. It's when you see in your search analysis that a lot of the saturation on a particular topic is by one entity. And when I say one entity, I don't mean one website. Yes, right? Because there's acquisition. So, you know, you're looking at one site, but then you're also looking at entities, which might be a conglomerate or a publisher model who has multiple points. They might have different intents covered. They might have different, you know,
ownership or influence on behalf of that brand, on behalf of that entity. Let's call it that.
Right, exactly right. So that's, I mean, how is that part of your research process when you're talking to someone like, hey, you don't just have this site in your crosshairs that you directly sell against. You've got this entire publishing network. What do we do in those situations? I mean, I run into that literally with clients every single day. What do you do to illustrate that you might not on a day-to-day think this is a competitor, but it is? You know,
yeah, it's looking at, right, it's correlating them to the rankings, right? It's like, look, here's these content types. Here's the bucket of keyword that is completely, you know, dominated by aggregator sites versus these direct point of sale sites versus these independent publisher sites versus these, I mean, at this point, parenting blogs, right? Parenting blogs are the new mommy blogs. So like, it's going in every direction to find where which sites or which content types have those rankings, right? And then the strategy becomes why do we build that type of content to fill that content need for that content type, and then it's how do we build that.
No, that's exactly where I'm headed with this discussion, and that's where I think it goes really from stop looking at one word to one page dynamics. You might need to create 50 pages for that one word, right? Because the word doesn't mean anything. And so I hear so much about cannibalization. How do you think about that? You know, it used to be when you were saying, hey, it's not about one word, one page, you were talking about topics. But now you're talking about, you know, you may need an entire foundation to get to that one word. So how do you how has that changed for you? And when you go from, hey, it's not just about one keyword to one page. There's no such thing as, you know, the old school view of cannibalization. How do you think about those things now?
I mean, it comes back to the exact same concept for me. Like, you have to do SERP analysis to understand those content types. It's also wild to, even just to think of the exact reverse of what you're describing, where you may have 50 pages on a topic, and that might be the standard, but Google may now be looking for, you know, a 5-page, like, you know, much deeper condensation, like change the fundamental reading level, change the way the query is actually being answered. You know, and whether, like, and that just comes down to constant testing, right? Because it's not, it's in, like, as you said, and I love that word so much, which is it's always in flux, right? So, and like, you've got, I talked about it way in the past, but the idea of a keyword beta, like just like the stock markets have a beta score. It's one of my favorite pieces of the SERP Blue tech, actually. Like, I love that they introduced that beta in there. I would love to see that become more targeted, but like that level, right? The measurement of how in flux a SERP is. And knowing that, and knowing how much you might want to invest, or pull back and limit, like, the testing for certain types of pages. But
yeah, keeping an eye on that is such a huge thing, because you're in even, you know, the meaning of the word can change, the intent behind the word can change. But that also gets to kind of, you would talk about with topic modifiers, you know, with the intent fracture. A lot of folks are looking for keywords. They're looking to rank for keywords, but those keywords could be addressing two different meanings, which isn't about intent, by the way. That's meaning disambiguation, and that's, you know, that actually two different words completely. Google figures out their favored intent for those topics versus the actual research. And you're talking about doing this with large pools of words, right? It's not about one word when you're doing this type of analysis, right?
Oh yeah, it's looking at the footprint of that individual URL to trying to understand, like, what is the topical coverage that this page is satisfying, and you can try to map that obviously into the user journey, but that's where, like, you're starting to look at, like we talked about yesterday on Twitter, starting to a little bit, or that might have been the conversation before that, but we started to talk about how you can look at the way the SERP changes and the way the types of the information changes as you look at how you try to emulate user behavior, right? And the search journey and those content types that they're seeing, and getting all that data into a place where you're able to paint out those maps of the topics. I think that's the gold mine, right? That's what's working right now.
No, and I think you've hit it. We're two of the people only talking about this, right? There's a lot of search engine optimization professionals in the circles that we are in thinking about this critically, but I think the one sphere out is only thinking about it at the word level. But you've always, when you're building out content maps, even if you're only looking at 50 words or 100 words, it's collecting all the content types and mapping all the content types that are in the mix as potential ones you need to create. So I think that is one way to think about how do you go from this keyword lists to here's the pages I need to create. You know, is that kind of the thing you're trying to tell the world with this? Is it, hey,
this would be a fantastic opportunity for like a graphic, like, to be able to do this. Let's see here. Yeah, hold on one second.
Improv graphics, I love it. There's a dog in the background.
Oh yeah, she's been here the whole time. This is
full frame.
Yeah, here we go.
I love it.
See the top of it at least? Yeah, you can kind of see it.
Looking good, top of the graph.
So what I'm saying is, if this is your conversion funnel, right? You still see that?
Yeah, might
Kind
be to
of?
get a little closer.
Yeah.
Ah, perfect. Now we can. It's
There.
awesome.
Good.
And it's on the bed. Yes, perfect.
All right. So this is your conversion funnel,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then you've got your bands of keywords all the way in here. I'm saying then obviously like these keyword bands, right? They have these topics
Mm-hmm.
within each of them. So inside these topics, right, are all of these content types. So figuring out what these are in here. Still making sense?
Absolutely.
With everybody else. Yeah,
I will validate it and walk it through in a summary afterwards with the graph afterwards. So yeah.
But as a prescription, right, for like, here's what your competitors are doing. Here's where there's open holes, right? Here's where there's opportunities that you can exploit. So here's what we would recommend and prioritize on, how you're creating your content. Anyway.
That is beautiful. No, it's really that. It's almost like an inventory of the whole universe within that topic of all the content types people have tried to write. Which ones then should be in your plan? Which ones most fit what you need to create? And that's the difference between keywords and kind of content mapping for topics right now. I think it's understanding that total pool and then making those decisions based on prioritizations or quick wins or intent. And you often will talk about kind of focusing on the quick wins or the ones with the most, purchase intent. But is that because you're an agency and you want to put quick wins on the board? Is that how you would do it normally? How would you decide what you're going to create first or what you're going to optimize first?
Oh man, it depends. So full transparency, yeah, absolutely. I want to bring quick wins to the table anytime I'm working with a client. Right. The faster I can, you can validate that the return on investment and prove value and prove to them why you deserve the trust. Yeah, anyway, you get the idea. But yeah, fuck yeah, I want quick wins. But aside from that, I mean, it becomes like it's all in that like a scatter graph, right? Like the idea of time, time and investment versus level of return. And if there's ever stuff for that's going to deliver like just a massive return, that's like I sent a tweet today because I was like going down a rabbit hole for a prospect and found this keyword that they has like the one word, like the head term, the one word head term is 200,000 searches a month. The modified, the bigram, the modified version of, so it's a descriptor and the head term was 1.8 million, and then the 3-word version, so a modified version of this modified term of the original class was 4.4 million with 4.6 million clicks per month. And this company we're talking to like this is what they are, and they are the biggest it just blew my mind. This is one of those things where it's like, hey, go do this thing that'll take you 30 seconds to do.
No, exactly. No, and that's so beautiful. And the two things, like describing what that was, is that you've got a word that if you were to just take the broad match volume for that head term,
yes,
that would be so misleading. It would be so misleading. You could actually burn millions of dollars if you only looked at that number. And that's where and to the example that you described is because if you're looking at a broad match or on that, or even the phrase match search volume on that term, let's say it's extremely high, but the exact match is only 200,000. And then you've got this variant with 1 million phrase match. Then you've got a variant of that variant that's 3 million. I mean, and that's where you're finding these scenarios where traditional thought process on what intent fracture is garbage. I mean, it's effectively garbage. I mean, and even some of the ways that people have backed into this without topic modeling, which is, the foundation of what MarketMuse does. Obviously, that's the punchline, right? But where you said, I'm looking at the word in this cluster that has the highest volume, and I'm going to say that that's the parent, right? And that's been the way people have backed into it forever. An example like this, or 0-click results, where the search volume doesn't matter. because there's
Yeah.
almost no clicking. Like those are the two things that really challenge that North Star. Really, I mean,
A
what
lot of the
other
traditional
examples?
models, yeah, and a lot of the current reporting that's still going on at a lot of internal organizations.
Yeah. So I mean, that's really an awesome example. And then that ideally, like when you get that high volume, low competition term, is that actually a high ROI term but guaranteed anymore? And that's where I think something that you were talking about too. But let's talk about difficulty or competition. How do you think about competition generally? What are the things you're looking for, and what's been your process over time? What's your process now for evaluating the competition on a topic or on that entire pool of words or that cluster? So
yeah, I mean, it's baseline. It's the part of our initial, any initial look for us at like at a TAM or total addressable market is going to be, once you've done mapping of all of your modifier terms and you've put, grouped terms by topic and awareness stage, or customer journey name, or whatever that has to, however that has to map to the client's individual customer journey, purchase journey, right? Then looking at the grouping, then like at the domain level, I'm looking at who are the competitors, like the website competitors, in addition to content types. Like who are the actual competitors that have the largest footprints in each of those components, right? Like each of those groups of companies or groups of websites. So like who has the most commercial terms, who has the most review content, who has the most video content, who has the most video SERPs. Just pulling that all out to be able to identify, patterns just start to sort of jump out at you when you know this. It's
no, that's
every data visualization idea, right, in history. It's just if you're able to slice the data the right way and you know what to look at, the patterns show themselves.
So do you look at those competitors' content creation cadence or the publishing cadence and how often they update content, or are you really looking at their existing footprint?
We don't really deal much on the publishing side.
Okay.
Like if people, when publishers come to us now, it's happily pass those opportunities along to other folks who are more qualified. That's a whole different wheelhouse in my opinion. So we've got some clients who are obsessed with, which is totally cool. If you want to be with the publishing cadence of their competitors and of a lot of the industry publications that they think they should be competing with for share of voice and stuff like that, that want to know that stuff. But generally, no. I'd rather pay attention to rankings and what's going on in the SERPs, like in terms of the stuff you're not going to get from a rankings report, right? Like actually paying more attention to pixels, positions, colors, like a lot of like the core changes that augment user behavior, like the UI changes that augment user behavior, especially when it's super intentional, like everything they've been doing with all their login management and Gmail interface and a lot of the other stuff. That's
no, that's cool. Yeah, that's a good point. Tracking back to difficulty and kind of the difficulty to rank, if you're looking at the coverage and the clout of those competitors, how do you compare that to processes that other people, more lightweight processes that people take for evaluating the competition on a search result? I know the worst practice being looking at PPC competition, but maybe one level worse than looking at PPC competition because of that being not very correlative. What are the things that you kind of would urge people to transition their keyword research process to for looking at competition?
So I mean, I do still like, again, barometer, right? I like using a cost per click metric to gauge the amount of commercial interest, right? Because it's still the best barometer for that. It's a bidding system, like
totally agree.
So like that's going to show like hard investment, real media dollars, which is going to represent any of the enterprise dollars anyway. And then I'm still a big links person. When it stops being important, I'll stop caring about it, sort of thing. But so we'll pay attention to the usual bevy of link metrics at the domain level. It's just a baseline, right? It's like understanding, what is it going to take to punch at this level, within certain SERPs. So yeah, all of your run-of-the-mill metrics from Majestic, Ahrefs, everything else, that whole thing. Anyway. And then we'll actually look at what's ranking in top 20, top 30 results on a term by term basis. and pull those all out, those groups of rankings. So we still like correlating a lot of the same type, either the same when we see the same pages, or we see the same content types ranking for lots of different terms that are potentially in the same bucket or spread out across two buckets, which I think is even more interesting. Is like if you're able to spot topic, like actual topic fracture, because it goes in both directions, right? You'll have Google treat for a long time topics completely separately, and then there'll be a point where they converge, and it'll evolve into Google wants to see both of these spoken about. There's a lot of great fintech examples of that, of topics getting so close together in terms of what the query intent actually is, where they get merged. And then you see the exact opposite, where topics over time, we're seeing this in it's all over, rampant in the CBD industry right now. Is you're seeing new topics create their own subtopics, and those subtopics splinter. And watching it in CBD oil is fascinating, because it went from CBD oil to pets, and pets went into cats and dogs, obviously, for volume reasons, but watching it fracture then into rabbits and horses, and now getting down into some really weird off the beaten path species of animals, because it's proliferating this demand. We're watching these vertical markets emerge and then start to spread out horizontally, and watch it paying attention to the search results, right? And those topic buckets, as those topics, the terms that people are using to represent topics of interest and awareness stages, as they converge or diverge, I think is what I was trying to say there.
Yeah, I mean that's on the money. I mean the cool thing by the way you described it, and I actually have never heard anybody describe it that way, is when you're talking about competitive analysis, you're not just talking about that page, right? You're not talking about that search result.
Yeah,
you're talking about their breadth of coverage, their depth of coverage, or I like to say go across and down of everything they've got on that topic. How well do they cover that topic? He agrees about the breadth and depth, or she does, sorry. The breadth and depth coverage. And
I'm just going to let her out. Hold on.
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry, she wouldn't, yeah, anyway.
COVID home office.
Yeah, COVID home office.
Cannot live in Georgia. But no, the breadth and depth, but it's then about kind of an amalgamation of how often are you writing high quality content? How often are you writing content that exhibits expertise? And then cross-referencing that against the metrics that you live and die by, the link metrics, the volume metrics as North Star. I mean, you have to take all those things into account to be able to actually predict the future, right? And to say, yeah, this is probably going to do well. I mean, and that's the basis of, we have a lot of, that's the basis of our personalized difficulty metric, because we can look at your inventory and say, here's who you are today. You're super strong on this. Don't go write an article about roasting coffee. Focus on SEO, Nick, and it will give you that, because it will say that against all of the combinations of all of those breadth and depth analysis all in one place. And the difference in that is just looking at, I mean, obviously joking around, but you're right. It's a great barometer, just CPC as an indicator of purchase intent. Absolutely. But only looking at that to cross-reference with competition doesn't work, right? You have to look at all these other pieces. So I thought that was really well said on that. How do you calculate the potential for the client, kind of the upside potential of clicks? Are you still using kind of what's left of clickstream data, or what are you working with?
It's relying on the tools data. So it's getting data from every available data source that we trust. The good and bad news is there's only a handful of them that satisfy both of those requirements, and blending them all together and trying to find the middle ground and use that to infer best judgment. But now we still do some manual calculations for scoring using all those a mashup of data across all those tools.
Gotcha. No, that's fair, and that's something that we're actually actively working on, is the most accurate traffic potential number. We've got it, Nick. It's coming. I've seen it. It's real. But no, another thing you mentioned was intent mismatch. I reference it as, but where you see a page performing, but it's actually not answering the question of the query. What do you do in those situations? Is that where you're like, I'm going to go write the best article on that topic? If you see that happening,
or it's it's being willing to try something new and bring like a big new idea to the table, right? Like again, like my favorite, the most like the biggest one in my mind for that right now is CBD oil. And watching what happened with like watch CBD oil completely bifurcate from best CBD oil, and watching the major players who are ranking for both of those terms, watching some hold on, for dear life to those rankings without changing the content type and without starting to invest, sending some of that, specific topicality, like cross, bifurcated, whatever you want to call it, topicality to a new page, like realizing that like they're going to lose that lower ranking. They're going to have to make that, that's an opportunity cost. They're going to make that investment in ranking the new page to satisfy, that the intent has fractured. And now, Wikipedia is Google's going to treat CBD oil as more of an informational query, and timeliness and QDF and that stuff's all going to play a bigger role. Whereas best CBD oil is going to be, product-based content. It's going to be review content type, and Google's expecting to see affiliate sites there for right now, and until manufacturers and the brands themselves start to get creative and find ways to crack into those SERPs.
That was an awesome set of acronyms. But you're basically talking about a QDF, your query deserves freshness, in case anybody's playing at home. But basically you're basically saying you've got to watch out. If you rest your laurels on a ranking and the intent changes and you don't, you die.
Yeah. And sometimes like what's going to do the best to satisfy the intent, like to satisfy that result, may not even exist yet among the current ranking sites. Like that, spotting those opportunities to be like, what are people expecting, or where have we seen this content pattern? Just like if there's a design pattern, like where have we seen a content pattern that would satisfy this potentially better? Me and you, I think, were riffing on this for a while about like a lot of the fintech SERPs, and like as soon as new content patterns get introduced and you see pages begin to start performing, you'll see that content pattern proliferate across, the top set of ranking pages pretty quickly.
I mean, I've never heard it described that way. And this is like the basis of what I've been doing for a really long time. So that's really cool. It's that, when we build a topic model, we'll look at tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of pages, and then overlay that against what's out there. So then it automatically finds the differentiated topics, the things that nobody's written about yet, but are semantically related. You're basically saying that.
Yeah, and as they're bubbling up, it's being able to identify them and be like, all right, we need to start considering creating content for that topic. That could be a few paragraphs on an existing page right now to begin to build that relevancy scoring. And then as that topic begins to emerge and grow up and become a big fruitful topic tree, like we'll take that segment of that page when it's time, and we'll move that into its own dedicated page, and we'll build a strategy around ranking that page as it makes sense.
So that we've somewhat automated editorial in some respect by looking for different.
At least the process of discovering. I mean, right. It's all about being ahead of the curve, because it's this giant moving target. So yeah, being able to keep up with that, the shifting of the topic tides, totally. I think.
I mean, I'll give you a great example of that. And I'd be interested in if CBD oil because at one time nobody knew what it was, so it was informational, and then you're referencing now it's comparison effectively in a purchase journey as the legalities. I assume that's the journey.
Yeah, I mean, you're even seeing like CBD oil for blank, like that, and the best CBD oil for blank. Those again were the same pages. They're not anymore. Like it's not done making that shift. But it's being diluted.
And I can guarantee to everyone on this call, you have 20 of those or 100 of those in your term pool, right? In your topic universe right now that you could find very easily. And that's, that's really, it happens all the time. And I have an example where, no one was really in our world was really focusing on content briefs, 4 years ago, and we were the first person to productize a content brief, right? And now, at first it was like, what is a content brief? Like, what is this anyway? And now you've got people who are looking for, examples of them. It's
the most meta thing we could talk about, right? Because you're talking about creating a product, and then the market accepting that coined term and accepting that product name and what that product represents, selling it to their clients, and then the other software companies coming in and being like, oh, you know, this is what we're calling this anyway. This is what clients are trying to ask us about this term.
Right.
So we're going to bring a product to market with that name.
No, and that's awesome. I think that is a go-to market strategy that everyone can take away from this discussion, is to say, okay, I've got keywords I want to rank for, but what I'm not thinking about is unique ways that I might service this market and service this buyer journey that nobody else has ever approached. And I think that that's really an awesome way to describe it.
I want to come back to the topic that we were getting into, and then I believe I steered us off course. But the idea of like evolving into a place where you're saturating, you know, the rankings and or the term universe that you identified as your total addressable market, and then because you were speaking to the idea that you as a website already have this topical relevance for this universe of terms, and there's going to be terms that are closer to those terms that are not in that universe, but they're closer to it than other terms. And knowing what those are, and knowing how you can grow that footprint, sort of throw your weight around as a website to rank for these terms, was something we were talking a lot about, because I was explaining to you how you know, we're doing experiments now where we're using wiki data to find, based on the shortest word vectors, the next topics that are the closest to our clients, you know, existing TAMs, to expand those TAMs to other people with, you know, other topics with this sort of the same interest graphs, and trying to think about that as bigger ways to grow that topical universe. And you were telling me a little bit about what you're doing with that.
It's very similar concept. So I think that when you were talking about using Wikipedia to almost create a visualization of who you are today, effectively, like, and that is basically what 10 years ago people wish they were building with content inventories. You know, that's what they were trying to do. But it's like, it's looking in the mirror and actually saying, here's who you are. Who do you want to be? What's the distance between who you want to be and that? And then are there any related topics, that semantically related things, that you'll have an easy win, you know, where you have existing momentum on something. You know, I like to think of like 6 degrees of separation, 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon or whatever. What's the 2 degrees away? And how do I approach that most effectively? And you're doing that with Wikidata. We built a topic modeling, you know, we have a huge universe that we've built. You can use Wikidata. Google uses Wikidata. I mean, go find a URL in a SERP feature that has a stick parameter. That's the manifestation of Wikidata. You know, they're using that freebase taxonomy in so many different ways. So you can do this. And tell me a little bit about that, what you're doing with Wikipedia. And I think, you know, what have maybe it's been an insight or an example of an insight that you found there.
So I was doing a bunch of the testing I was doing were around some like the SEO terms, and like sort of the advent of where those terms came from, right? Because if you look at Wikipedia and how old Wikipedia is and what that timeline of information looks like, SEO was not a big part of that. It didn't really exist, and it obviously in the state it does today back then. So you look back at those terms, and then you've got things like old terms, like terms you would laugh about.
Right.
Like you know, link farm and you know, spamming and stuff that has taken on different meanings obviously over the years. But looking at how far away those are from SEO, and the things that are also still very close to SEO, some of which are not safe for work things, but they're very, very close in the topical universe. So it's starting to unpack that a little bit. Practical applications of which would be like, again, let's say you're in a retail industry and you are looking for product lines. You know, you've got stuff that you rank really well for in type categories of products, finding other potential product lines that would be considered close to those, you know, from that topical distance perspective. You know, is a potential path for product development if you wanted to do a search-driven product rollout.
No, I mean, I'll give you one quick one. I had, you know, we have a client who had 2 product lines, and they need to figure out how much they needed to invest to grow each one of them. And we were able to tell them by using this that they needed to build 120 articles a year on average, and there's the investment over here. Over here, it was a much quicker win. It was about 25. They changed their whole business strategy because they're like, I'm going to get the same outcome. It's predictable.
It's an investment prospectus.
And then, you know, how do you connect the dots between those 2 topics? Maybe you need to build a huge infrastructure to actually figure out what that bridge content is. This happens a lot. where you have, we want to branch out into this new topic. It's not just about, connecting one word to the other,
We're watching HubSpot do it live, right? They're going from CRM into chatbot, auto, sale, like they're just like we're here and we're going to throw our weight that direction now.
Well, speaking of that though, that's one question is what I find a lot of folks, they will look at their idols and what they're writing and try to emulate those instead of looking at their entire pool of what they've done on the same topics. What's the what do you recommend as far as kind of the dangers of trying to mimic your idols on these types of things?
There's usually a really good chance that you're over investing or you're investing in the wrong assets areas. I mean, you're probably wasting a lot of money. Right. It comes back to the concept of the scatter graph.
Mm-hmm.
It's time versus investment for return, and if you're not, that's only looking at one axis, I guess is how I would characterize that.
Now, there's some major publishers whose SEO leads, will literally stand up and say, we are allowed to be black hats. We're that strong. Why would you want to try competing with us? And yeah. I mean, that's tough. It's tough to hear, but it's true. I mean, yeah. The things that they get, if you can see these large entities getting away with murder, don't try to emulate the page that's ranking. You may put yourself into a really bad spot. We've got some awesome questions, but thank you so far, Nick. And it's going to go on into the AMA. We've got a lot of it. Cool. So some more basic ones. What is a search engine results page? I'm going to start there with that. So thank you for that question. Search engine result page. Now you can go back and go, oh, search engine result page feature. What are some search engine result page features?
I mean, it's all the various types of answer boxes, right? I mean, they just like my mind immediately goes to like, oh, there's a carousel, but then it's like, well, there's a cast carousel versus a video carousel versus a product carousel. So like, there's all those different
page. The stuff on the page that isn't 10 blue links.
All those different displays, yeah.
Search feature. So solutions like a SEMrush or an Ahrefs or any of the above have typically on a word, they will have what SERP features appear on that search result.
Like a knowledge panel and potentially.
And you can pick out which one. So that's one way for this person who is asking the question is how do I figure out what SERP features are available? You can look at it, which isn't very scalable, or you can find a solution that actually is scraping search results and gives you those features. Great question.
Yeah, any search results, any of the modern, I mean, it's become table stakes at this point. So any of the modern search, like rank trackers will have it.
Why would I need to know those SERP features to do?
I mean, it's all right. You're fighting for pixels. So like there may be one SERP like that where let's say 70% of the people searching for that keyword are on their phone, and it's got a feature, and so it takes up 80% of the average screen real estate. Like it's huge. There's no ads yet on it, and that might have like an 80 or 90% click-through rate versus let's say you have one that is running 3 ads. There's no SERP features at all. Or there's like a native Google feature like a carousel or something that like isn't even actually organic results, and the first organic result is so far down that you actually only get like a 1% click-through rate, like even though it's your first organically. So there's knowing everything that's going on those, because it's all about the it's called human computer interaction is like the academic level, but it's all about us as human beings, like how us and our brains and our bodies and our motor functions use these devices. So like so much of the behavior of the user is not necessarily considered. And if you think of like our whole world of devices these days, like you have to consider user behavior and consider like the interface is going to be, interface drives all user behavior, right? Interface first, copy second, content third, if I had to. Awesome. Very, very much off the top of my head anyway.
The follow-up question that this person asks is, how does this apply to local? We're going to take that into the AMA because that's a long question. All right, another one. How can Nick, can you talk more about long tail keywords? Are they still part of your strategy? I know I can't compete with the Pepsi of my industry. So what should I do in this situation? This is a bit of a layup for you, but that's a good one. So yeah.
I mean, yeah, like we all, on the quick wins front, the quickest wins are always going to come all the way at the tip, the furthest tip of that tail. Finding those it tends to be very difficult, which is why I'm always going to encourage people to start spending money on paid search immediately. If you don't know what those terms are, find out the closest, deepest, longest tail term you can. That's creating a conversion that you have verifiable, attributable information from, shit you'll never get from organic. And then use that to start testing organic pages and potentially find how much longer that tail maybe goes.
Yeah, I think that's a Philly strategy. I think you know, so Will Reynolds has a lot documented on that. Nick does as well. Buy the pool and get as much data as Google AdWords will give you.
Yep.
And
yeah, Will is a very big advocate of the same strategy. He's been
same strategy. No, that's awesome. Look it up. There's a lot documented on that. I love that for keyword research, but also looking at you know, some of the things you talked about, also query modifiers that typically signify high intent, and work yourself backwards. That's a great question, Marianne. And also thanks, Paul, for the previous one. All right, Nick, you mentioned that your team heavily relies on Term Explorer for page level data with, I'm not going to say the name of the thing that is no longer available. Do you still use it, and is that data reliable? This is a little bit of a tough question, but you know, you did say an F word on here, so we're good.
Term Explorer has a lot of the backend functionality of Term Explorer has gotten moved over to Keyword Sheeter. Yep. You haven't seen that yet. And in terms of like really ugly tools that have a lot of really solid functionality for free, that is actually a pretty impressive tool set. I think they're all built on Common Crawl. So again, it's leveraging open source data sets to get, you know, a good snapshot. But if you want free directional data,
no, that's awesome.
That's a good call out.
Gotcha. No, that's good. When you start to see one topic fracturing and one of your pages starts to drop in rankings, do you recommend rewriting that page with the same URL, or do you target the new intent with a fresh piece of content and integrate that into your cluster?
If it's new intent, if the page is still ranking for one version of that query but not the other, yeah, I'm going to create I would probably start by creating a new page for the query that it lost rankings for, and remove any. I mean, we saw a pretty incredible rankings increase on a big travel client when we took like a paragraph of like what is style content, like very informational content, off of one of their main like middle of funnel terms. So yeah, I mean, like again, like that just comes down to back to the idea of like the tighter you can match the intent of the query, if you're able to chop all the fluff out and just really answer, you know, and that could mean a million things, right? Like we have a client who's really important keyword ranking is the name of a country. Like that's it. Like that's an important fucking keyword for them. Go figure.
Nice. No, that's a great question. As the person who used to manage whatis.com, you are right. That is how it works. So the other piece of that is look at the entire pool of words that page is connected to. It's very important. If it's small, one answer. Big,
go small.
Another answer. The great question. Thank you, Javon. All right, well, let's wrap it with a question from Stunt Double himself, Todd Malico. All right, thanks for listening, Todd. What data points are you using to determine the most accurate traffic volume estimation today?
Well, I personally, I'm not going to speak for everybody on my team because there's a bunch of different opinions, I think, at this point. But I really prefer Ahrefs for volume and click and traffic estimates at the URL at the page level. They just consistently have had the best, like the most up-to-date index, and they've really gotten very good at cutting a lot of the spam and fluff and bullshit stuff that shouldn't be included to you know, artificially inflate a lot of the other scoring out there. But still, we also still rely super heavily on Majestic as a barometer for trust, because measures like TF, trust flow, citation flow, and topical trust flow are still super important, especially if you're trying to transfer link equity. Like if the TTFs are too far off, and you know, we're starting to be able to see some patterns into like how much you can flex from one to the other. But if they're too far off, you're just, that link equity is not going to be recognized. It's the topicality is too far apart.
Off page, Majestic, on page. Before I built it myself, which is coming out in MarketMuse, Ahrefs. I mean, and SEMrush combined as an amalgamation. I mean, those are the two things for me for sure.
But that's the biggest thing, right? Like the tool that gets the adoption for the ability to predict traffic is going to be, I mean, that's the ring, right? Like that's going to be the tool to rule them all, because that's the problem that everybody needs solved.
Thanks. That's good validation from Nick Eubanks. All right, and so now we're going to head into the AMA. I've got a pile of questions still here, and so thank you all for joining us, and we hope that we see you shortly for the rapid fire round of the Ask Me Anything. Nick, thanks real much for joining us. Quick plugs for anything from the future or agency builder?
Stay tuned. I don't know. There's events coming from every direction. So
I'll say go join Traffic Think Tank. And
yeah, that's always a really good advice, because I mean, these are the conversations that we're having in there on a daily basis.
Yeah, this is every day at Traffic Think Tank, what we're talking about. You know, sometimes higher level, sometimes lower level. Go by, we've got a 15% webinar only discount for any of our self-service offerings. MarketMuse isn't only an expensive offering. It is, depending on, you know, the size of your investment, the size of your team, but you can have access to it, see if it's the right fit for your business in a very, very accessible way right now. So go do that, Webinar 15. And Nick, thanks so much for joining us, and thanks for sticking it out for the AMA. This has been awesome. I mean, I think we could probably write 40 blog posts just about this conversation. So cheers, and thank you so much.
No, it's my pleasure, man. Thanks.
Cheers.